The machines said I was unconscious. My family said they wished I wouldn't wake up. They were wrong on both counts. And that one mistake cost them everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Dennis Shaw. I'm 56 years old. I live in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, in a neighborhood called Dunes West. We had a 4-bedroom house on Cypress Hollow Lane. Nice house. I built a mid-size logistics company, Shaw Freight Logistics, out of a 400-square-foot office on Rivers Avenue back in 1998. By last year, we had 52 employees, 4 warehouse contracts, and a revenue number that made my accountant smile every single quarter. I say had like it's past tense. We'll get to that. My wife, Carol, 53, had been with me for 30 years. We'd been married for 28. My son, Brett, 27, worked loosely in the business, which mostly meant he forwarded emails and attended the Christmas party. My daughter, Yulia, 24, lived 20 minutes away in West Ashley and called me every other Sunday, usually when she needed something. And Trent Colby, 33. Carol had gotten pregnant by a high school boyfriend named Colby. They never married. And though the guy hung around the fringes of Trent's life, he was never a real father, couldn't hold a job, didn't pay a dime, and Carol had sole legal custody. When I met Carol, she was a 22-year-old single mother trying to raise a 5-year-old boy on her own, and I fell head over heels. We were young, broke, and desperately in love. We got married 2 years later, right around the same time I was risking everything to start Shaw Freight Logistics. I raised Trent from the time he was 5, treated him like my own flesh and blood, and because his biological father was still alive, we just never did formal adoption paperwork. He kept his last name, but I eventually made him my VP of operations. I trusted that man with everything. I mean that literally. I'll come back to all of them. It was a Thursday in late September when everything changed. I'd had a long meeting at the office, our Rivers Avenue location. 2nd floor. The one with the flickering hallway light. I kept telling Brett to get fixed, and he kept not fixing. The kind of thing that shouldn't matter but somehow always does in hindsight. I left around 8:15 p.m. I remember checking my phone at a red light on Highway 17. Carol had texted, "Dinner's in the fridge." The last thing I remember is the green light turning, pulling into the intersection, and then nothing. A pickup truck ran the light, doing about 60, hit the driver's side dead on. The paramedics said I was lucky to be alive. They said my seatbelt saved me. They said a lot of things I wasn't awake to hear. I woke up partially 4 days later, and I wish I hadn't. Here's the thing about being in a coma that nobody tells you. It's not like sleep. It's more like being locked in a room with no light and no door. You can hear sounds, voices, the beeping of machines, almost everything happening around you. But you can't open your eyes. You can't move your hand. You're just there, trapped inside your own body. Listening. Roper State, Francis Hospital. Equal. 2nd floor. I know because I heard a nurse say it. The first voices I recognized were a doctor's and Carol's. Day 4. I think mid-morning, judging by how loud the hallway was. Mr. Shaw is stable, the doctor said. His brain activity is improving. We're cautiously optimistic. But he could be unconscious for another week. Possibly 2. We'll continue monitoring. And if he doesn't improve, Carol asked, then we'd revisit the conversation about care options. What kind of options? That was Brett. He was there too. We could look at transferring him to a long-term acute care facility, and depending on how things progress, We discuss whether to pursue further aggressive intervention, ventilator support, resuscitation, that kind of thing. A pause. And then Carol said it. Calm as a woman ordering coffee. He always said he'd hate being kept alive by machines. If it comes to that, if his heart stops, I want to sign whatever order means you don't bring him back. The DNR. Or whatever it's called. I felt my whole chest cave in. Did she just, he told us himself. Brett added quickly. Almost like he'd rehearsed it. That if anything like this ever happens, he never wanted to be a burden. That's just who Dad is. I never said that. Not once in my life. How would anyone know this would happen to them? He's 56. Carol continued. He's lived a full life. He cares so much about everyone else. He wouldn't want us suffering through this. 56 is a full life. She said that. My wife of 28 years looked a doctor in the eye and said 56 is a full life. Like she was describing a houseplant that had run its course. I heard the distinct sharp click of a plastic pen cap. She signed the formal DNR papers right there at my bedside. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Couldn't do a single thing except lie there and listen. Don't react. Don't move. Just listen. That thought probably saved my life more than the seatbelt did. They came back that evening. All 4 of them this time. I heard the door open. Heard the chair legs scrape across the floor. Heard someone crack open a soda. I'm almost certain it was Brett. Because of course it was. Julia spoke first. He looks the same. He's stable. Carol said. Doctor thinks maybe another week. Another week. Julia sighed. Not a sad sigh. An inconvenient sigh. I have stuff going on. Mom. I can't keep driving out here every 2 days. Stuff going on. Your father is in the ICU and you have stuff going on. Nobody's asking you to. Brett said. Julia stopped. He was never there for any of my stuff. So I don't know why I should rearrange my whole life for this. There it was. Julia. Carol said softly. Not a warning. More like a reflex. I'm serious. Every school play. Every graduation thing. He was always working. Always some meeting. Some client. Some deal. Now we're supposed to drop everything. She's not wrong about the work. She's not wrong. But I was building something for them. For all of them. Trent spoke for the first time. His voice was steady. Measured. The way it always was in board meetings. He made it clear he didn't want to be a burden to anyone. I think we respect that. Exactly. Brett said. Then. Quieter. Besides. Once the estate clears, the trust starts paying out. I looked at the folder in his study last year. I know what my share is. I'm 27. I've been waiting. Brett. Carol cut him off. What I'm just saying. Not here. Silence. Once the estate clears, the trust starts paying out. I looked at the folder in his study last year. My son, my 27-year-old son, had been rifling through my private papers and had already penciled my death into his financial calendar while I was lying 3 feet away. A line item. My maturity date on a bond. I cannot describe what that feels like. I won't even try. Over the next 4 days, I heard things I will never unhear. I heard Brett on the phone. I think he stepped just inside the doorway. Thought I was too far gone to matter. Telling someone. Yeah. He's not waking up. Few more days. Probably. Liston. Can you look into some properties on Isle of Palms? I'll have liquidity soon. Liquidity. His father. Liquidity. I heard Julia tell Carol she thought the Cypress Hollow house was too big for just one person, and that Carol should think about downsizing after. After, just after, like I was a seasonal event, I heard Trent quiet. Efficient Trent. The man I promoted. The man I took to Panthers games. The man I lent $35,000 to in 2020 because family helps family. I heard him tell Carol, and I'm quoting directly, "The sooner we settle the estate, the cleaner this is. I can manage the transition at Shaw Freight. I know where everything is." I bet you do. Trent. I didn't know yet what I meant by that. Not fully. But something cold settled in my gut and just stayed there. Carol said, "Let's not rush." Trent said, "Of course. I just want to be ready." Of course you do. Day 9. Late September. Charleston humidity even through the hospital walls. I opened my eyes. The nurse screamed. In a good way, I think she called for the doctor. There was noise. Light. The sudden chaos of people who weren't expecting to celebrate. The doctor came in, ran his checks, started asking me questions. "What year is it? Who's the governor? Can you squeeze my hand?" I answered everyone. And when Carol walked through that door 20 minutes later, her face did something complicated. There was relief in it. I want to be fair. There was, but underneath that, something else flickered. Something that disappeared so fast I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. She hugged me. She cried. She said, "I was so scared." I held her back. I said, "I know. I'm so lucky to have you." Every single word out of my mouth was a lie. And for the first time in 28 years of marriage, I was completely okay with that. They sent me home the next day. Brett held the car door open. Julia brought flowers, mustard yellow ones, which I've always hated. But sure. Trent shook my hand and said, "Welcome back." Dennis. We were worried sick. I smiled at every single one of them. "Welcome back." Oh, I was back. All right. And I had absolutely nothing but time. There's a specific kind of quiet that settles over a man who knows something nobody knows he knows. I lived in that quiet place for a month. Coming home from Roper State, Francis felt like walking back onto a stage mid-performance. Everyone knew their lines. Everyone had their marks. And I, the man who was supposed to be dead, had somehow wandered back into a play I wasn't written into anymore. Carol fussed over pillows. Brett carried my bag inside. Julia had stocked the fridge. She actually went grocery shopping for me, which in 24 years of her life, I could count on 0 hands. Trent stood in the doorway of my own house on Cypress Hollow Lane and said, "We've got everything handled at the office. Dennis, don't even think about work. Thank you." "Son," I said. Son. The word tasted like ash. But I smiled. I sat down in my own chair. I accepted the soup Carol made. And I played the most important role of my career, a tired, grateful, slightly confused 56-year-old man who just wanted to recover. I was none of those things. Week 2. I told everyone I was still dizzy, still getting headaches, still not quite sharp enough for the office. Carol believed it immediately, which told me everything about how much she'd been paying attention to me these past few years. Brett nodded sympathetically and went back to whatever Brett did all day, which from what I could tell involved a lot of golf and very little work. Julia checked in by text every 3 days. Trent said, "Take all the time you need." Dennis, "I've got the office." "I'm sure you do." Trent, "The first call I made was to a lawyer. Not our family lawyer. Not Harold Pruitt, over on Broad Street, who'd been handling our documents for 14 years, and who I suddenly realized Carol had probably had lunch with recently. No. I needed someone clean. Someone new. I found him through a referral from an old college buddy. His name was Curtis Reyes. Mid-50s. Office in North Charleston off Ashley Phosphate Road. The kind of lawyer who doesn't have a fancy waiting room because he doesn't need one. He had a handshake that meant something and eyes that didn't flinch. I sat across from him and said, "I need to know if my family is stealing from me. And I need you to assume the answer is yes." Curtis didn't blink. "Then let's find out." That was the beginning. The second call was to a private investigator named Dana Kowalski. Dana worked out of a small office in Goose Creek, drove a forgettable gray sedan, and had 20 years of experience that showed in the way she listened. Completely still. No reactions. Just absorbing everything. I told her about the hospital. I told her about Brett and the properties on Isle of Palms. I told her about Trent's. I know where everything is. I told her about Carol's voice when she told the doctor not to revive me. Dana wrote everything down. Then she looked up and said, "How long you been married?" 28 years. Dana just nodded slowly and wrote something down. Week 3. And this is where it gets ugly. Curtis called me on a Tuesday morning while Carol was at the gym. "Dennis," he said, "I need you to come in. And I need you to be sitting down when I show you this." I drove myself for the first time since the accident. Took Cypress Hollow Lane to Highway 17. Same route I'd driven 1,000 times. Parked behind Curtis's building. Walked in. He had a folder on his desk, roughly the thickness of a small novel. "Your VP of Operations," Curtis said, "has been moving money out of Shaw Freight Logistics for approximately 4 years. The number is $650,000. Siphoned slowly, carefully, through a combination of inflated vendor invoices, ghost expense accounts, and transfers routed through a shell account Trent set up under a company called Colby Freight Partners LLC, registered in Nevada. Invisible unless you knew to look." "He's your stepson?" Curtis asked. "Yes." His reasoning, and this is documented in some internal communications we recovered, is that he was, quote, "securing himself in case the will didn't include him because he's not your biological son." I sat with that for a long moment. He did it because he was afraid I wouldn't take care of him. I had paid for that man's apartment when he was 23. I had promoted him over people with twice his experience. I had taken him to Panthers games, to client dinners, to Hilton Head for a fishing weekend in 2022. I told him to his face more than once, "Your family. Trent, you don't have to worry." And he robbed me anyway. "There's more," Curtis said. Of course there was. Carol Shaw co-signed on 9 of these transactions. She has signing authority on the business accounts. Some of these couldn't have moved without her approval. Carol knew. My wife didn't just stand at a hospital bed and tell a doctor to let me die. She had been signing off on her son stealing from our company. From the company I built. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I sat in Curtis Reyes's office off Ashley Phosphate Road in North Charleston. And I felt something I can only describe as a door closing. Quietly. Firmly. Click. "The properties," I said. "Tell me about the properties." Curtis opened to another section of the folder. Months before the accident. Carol helping him every step of the way. Trent had prepared a forged power of attorney document bearing Carol's real signature and a forged version of mine. Right after the crash. The moment it looked like I wasn't leaving the ICU. He moved quickly. He used that fake POA to file a fraudulent quitclaim deed at the county register of deeds. He'd forced his name onto the titles as co-owner on both the Cypress Hollow House and the Shaw Freight Warehouse on Rivers Avenue. He moved quickly, Curtis said. He had this ready. He was waiting for the right moment. Can we reverse it? Yes. Our documents analyst has already confirmed the signature on the POA is a forgery. The handwriting analysis is airtight. I've prepared the lawsuit to freeze both properties and strike his name from the deeds entirely. He paused. But Dennis, the moment we file, Trent gets served. He'll know everything. Then we don't file yet. Curtis looked at me. I thought about Carol mentioning the anniversary dinner. Everyone in the same room. All of them smiling at me across the table. Monday morning, I said. After the party. Curtis nodded slowly. Then Trent walks into Saturday night thinking he owns half your house. That's exactly right. Dana Kowalski called 2 days later. I was sitting on my back porch, watching the water in our small backyard tidal creek go nowhere when my phone buzzed. You want to know about the affair, Dana said. His name is Blake Sutter, 32. Certified personal trainer at Tidewater Fitness on Long Point Road. Your wife has been seeing him for 16 months. Pausa. It's not casual. Dennis. 16 months. I did the math without meaning to. 16 months ago. Carol and I had gone to a New Year's Eve party at a neighbor's house in Dunes West. She'd worn a mustard dress. We danced to something forgettable. She'd kissed me at midnight and said, "This is going to be a good year." 2 weeks later, she started training with Blake Sutter. I put the phone down on the armrest, stared at the creek. 28 years. Not 28 bad years either. Even though we had our challenges and rough times, we had good years. Reallons. I wasn't some checked-out husband who forgot her birthday and worked through Christmas. I mean, I worked hard. Yes. And maybe more than I should have. But I showed up. I paid for everything. I built the life she was now distributing among her children and her gym instructor. I stared at the water. My hands were shaking. A cold, violent wave of nausea hit me so hard, I had to grip the porch railing just to stay upright. I wanted to scream until my lungs burned. I wanted to walk inside and smash every plate in the kitchen. But I forced my breath down. I closed my eyes until the shaking stopped. If I broke now, they wouldn't just get my money. They'd win. Keep moving. Dennis, there was one more piece I needed. I reached out to an employee named Tasha Lindgren. Tasha was 41. Sharp as a tack. Had been working in our accounts department for 7 years before Brett. In one of his rare exercises of actual authority, had her demoted over a personality conflict, meaning Brett didn't like being corrected. And Tasha had the nerve to do it twice. Tasha agreed to meet me at a coffee shop on King Street. She showed up 5 minutes early. Ordered a black coffee. And when I walked in, she looked at me like a woman who'd been waiting a long time to have a very specific conversation. I knew something was wrong with those vendor accounts. She said before I even sat down. I flagged it twice. Brett told me I was overstepping. But it wasn't Brett running it. It was Trent. And your daughter. Yulia. I paused. A coffee cup halfway to my mouth. Julia Trent was routing the cash through Colby Freight Partners. Tasha said, sliding a thumb drive across the table. But look at the secondary payouts. Trent was cutting monthly checks directly to Julia's boutique. It was a payoff. She discovered what her mother and Trent were doing a year ago. And instead of telling you, she demanded a cut to keep her mouth shut. She's been funding her entire life with your stolen revenue. Tasha became my inside contact over the next 10 days. She had personal backups she'd kept. Because Tasha was exactly that kind of thorough. That helped us reconstruct the fraud timeline with surgical precision. Dates. Amounts. Approvals. The whole chain. Every transaction Trent moved and Carol approved. Documented and cross-referenced. $650,000. 4 years. 37 separate transactions. All while I was driving home late from Rivers Avenue, thinking I was building something for my family. I was. Turns out I was building it for them to take. By the end of the month, here's what I had. Carol affair with Blake Sutter. 16 months. Co-signed on Trent's fraud. Helped forge the power of attorney. Told the doctor not to revive me. Trent, $650,000 stolen over 4 years. Forged POA. Put his name on 2 of my properties. Told the doctor I didn't want to be revived. Brett didn't know about the affair or the fraud, but sat in my ICU room and talked about liquidity on Isle of Palms properties. Wanted the trust fund. Told the doctor his dad didn't want to be a burden. Julia knew about the fraud. Demanded a monthly payoff to stay quiet. And lied straight to the doctor's face. Curtis had the property lawsuit locked and loaded. Sitting in a drawer. Ready to be filed Monday morning. Trent had no idea. As far as he was concerned, he co-owned my house and my warehouse. And I was home eating soup and watching TV. Let him keep thinking that. He had about a week left to enjoy it. I cleaned out our joint personal savings account, $950,000. Carol thought I never looked at the account where I'd been parking my corporate distributions for years, and moved every cent to an individual account at a completely different bank. Completely legal. My money. My signature. My name on the distributions that had built that balance in the first place. I also had a new will drawn up. The old one was generous. The new one was educational. Here's what I want you to understand. I'm not a vindictive man by nature. I'm a logistics guy. I like things organized. Sequential. Efficient. I like problems solved cleanly with minimum waste. What I was planning wasn't revenge in the Hollywood sense. It wasn't rage. It was logistics. And I had one final delivery to make. Our 28th wedding anniversary was 6 days out. Carol had already mentioned cheerfully over dinner one night, while I smiled across the table at the woman who'd signed my company's money over to her son, that we should do something special. Absolutely. I said. Let's invite everyone. Make it a real celebration. She smiled, reached across the table, and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. Every single one of them was going to be in the same room. And they were all going to get exactly what they deserved. Nobody throws a party for a dead man walking. But that's exactly what my family did. Carol planned the whole thing herself. Invitations went out to 16 neighbors from Dunes West. A few couples we'd known for years. The Kowalczyks from down on Cypress Hollow. Our pastor from Trinity Fellowship off Rifle Range Road. She ordered catering from a place on Broad Street, the good stuff. Not plastic trays from a grocery store. She rented tall cocktail tables with white linen. She bought a banner. 28 years. The Shaw family. I saw it rolled up on the kitchen counter 3 days before the party and stood there staring at it for a solid 10 seconds. The Shaw family. Sure. Let's celebrate that. The party was on a Saturday evening in mid-November. The kind of Charleston night where the heat finally backs off around 6, and you can actually stand outside without feeling like you're being slowly cooked. Our backyard on Cypress Hollow Lane was strung with lights. The tidal creek behind the house caught the reflection and turned it into something that looked almost peaceful. Almost. Brett showed up first, dressed like he was at a resort, which was Brett's default setting. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Looking good. Dad, you really bounced back." "Feeling great," I said. "Best I've felt in years." Honestly, he had no idea how true that was. Julia came in behind him, hugged Carol, handed me a card. I opened it right there. Inside, she'd written, "Dad, so glad you're still here. Love you." I looked at her handwriting for a moment. I thought about a little girl who used to fall asleep in the car on the way home from school. Thought about where that girl went. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. Trent arrived last. Because Trent always arrived last. He thought it made him look important. He was wearing a blazer. He shook my hand with both of his the way he always did when he was performing warmth rather than feeling it, and said, 28 years. Dennis, that's something. It really is. I said, hey, I've got something for everyone tonight. A little gift. Trent smiled. Yeah, what kind of gift? The life-changing kind. He laughed like that was a joke. It wasn't. By 7, the backyard was full. Neighbors were laughing. Glasses were clinking. Carol was moving through the crowd in a burgundy dress, looking like a woman without a single secret. Brett was on his second bourbon. Julia was talking to someone near the water. Trent was actually networking at my anniversary party, because that's who he was. Curtis Reyes was parked on the street out front, sitting in his car with a folder on the passenger seat. Dana Kowalski had made a phone call earlier that afternoon on my behalf. 2 Charleston County Sheriff's deputies were waiting in an unmarked car, 2 houses down. Everything was in position. I walked to the center of the patio, picked up a fork, and tapped my glass. Can I get everyone's attention? The yard went quiet. Carol looked over and smiled, that warm public smile she wore like jewelry. Brett raised his glass. Julia turned around. Trent crossed his arms and watched. 16 neighbors. My pastor. My family. An audience. Perfect. 28 years. I started. 28 years is a long time. You go through a lot together. You build something. You sacrifice. You make choices every day that you hope you trust are worth it. People nodded. Someone said, that's right. Nearly dying has a way of clarifying things. I continued. When I was lying in that hospital bed at Roper State, Francis, I had nothing to do but listen and think and remember. Carol tilted her head slightly. The smile stayed, but something shifted behind her eyes. There it is. She just felt the temperature change. I heard things in that room that I'll never forget. Things that changed me. And tonight, on our 28th anniversary, in front of everyone who's watched us build this life, I want to share what I learned. I reached down to the table beside me. 4 envelopes, each with a name written on the front in my own handwriting. The yard was completely silent now. Brett, my son, stepped forward, bourbon still in hand, with the vague smile of a man expecting a check. I handed him the envelope. He opened it. Read it. The smile didn't disappear all at once. It sort of drained slowly, like water leaving a bathtub. Inside was a single printed transcript. Every word he'd said in that ICU room. The liquidity comment. The Isle of Palms properties. Once the estate clears, the trust starts paying out. I looked at the folder in his study. I know what my share is. Beneath the transcript, a letter from Shaw Freight Logistics HR, dated that Friday. Brett, you're fired from Shaw Freight effective immediately. Your corporate gas card is canceled as of midnight tonight. The lease on your car that the company's been covering, that's done too. I let that settle. And if you're wondering about the future, my new will leaves you exactly $2,500. Don't worry. You can use it for liquidity. The word landed like I intended it to. Dad, I'm not finished. Julia. She walked over slowly, arms already crossed. She took the envelope like it might bite her. Inside, same transcript. Her section highlighted. He was never there for me. He was always working. Why should I care? And then the thing that I think hit her harder than anything else, a photograph printed on plain paper. Hospital security footage timestamp. 4:25 p.m. Day 4. The exact moment she told the doctor her father was suffering and should be let go. Julia looked at the photo. Looked at me. Dad, I didn't mean, Yulia. My voice was steady. You meant every word. And you knew about the money. I let that land. You knew. And you said nothing. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. My name comes off your apartment lease cosign as of Monday morning. You've got 30 days to find a new cosigner. A roommate. Or a cheaper place to live. I paused. Same as your brother. $2,500 in the new will. Spend it wisely. Carol. The party was a statue. Nobody moved. Nobody touched their drink. The Kowalczyks from down the road were staring at the ground like they were trying to disappear into it. Our pastor looked like a man regretting every life decision that led him to this backyard. Carol set down her glass very carefully. She walked over and took her envelope with both hands. Opened it. Inside. Dana Kowalski's surveillance report. 16 months of dates and locations. Blake Sutter. Tidewater Fitness on Long Point Road. The hotel off International Boulevard they used on Wednesday afternoons while I was running a company that she was simultaneously cheating and helping her son rob. Beneath that, Curtis documentation, her signatures on 9 fraudulent transactions. The forged power of attorney. Her handwriting next to mine. Except mine was a forgery, and everyone in that room was about to know it. And beneath all of that, divorce papers already filed. Already processed. She went pale. Not red. Not tearful. Pale. The kind of pale that means your body is having a conversation with reality that your brain hasn't caught up with yet. 28 years. I said quietly. And you couldn't wait 7 days. Dennis. Please. She looked at the neighbors. At the banner above our heads. 28 years. The Shaw family. You told the doctor I was 56 and that was a natural time to die. I wasn't shouting. I want to be clear. I never raised my voice once that entire night. I didn't need to. You signed documents that stole $650,000 from the company I built. You helped put another man's name on my house while I was unconscious. I paused. My lawyers filed the divorce papers on Friday. Because of the money your son stole with your signature on it. My settlement offer is the deed to that old duplex we bought in Hanahan back in 2005. You can live there. Or you can go to court and let a judge spend his morning looking at your fraud timeline. Your choice. Carol Shaw stood in her burgundy dress. In the backyard, she decorated herself, surrounded by every person in her social world, and had absolutely nothing to say. Trent. He hadn't moved from his spot near the edge of the patio. He was very still. The blazer suddenly looked like a costume. I didn't hand Trent an envelope. I just looked at him. Your biological father couldn't be bothered to raise you, leaving your mother with sole custody and nothing to her name. I said, I married her when you were just a 5-year-old kid, and I gave you a real home, a father's love, and eventually the keys to my company. I promoted you. I lent you money. I called you son. My voice stayed level, but something underneath it could have cut glass. And for 4 years, you stole from me $650,000, 37 transactions. And when I survived, you were annoyed. Trent's jaw tightened. Dennis, whatever you think you have, I don't think anything. I know. Curtis filed the criminal complaint for identity theft and deed forgery with the Charleston County Sheriff's Office yesterday morning. The warrant was signed at noon today. I looked toward the side of the house. Come on in. 2 deputies in plain clothes walked through the gate. The yard made a sound I can't fully describe. A collective intake of breath. Someone knocked over a glass. Brett took a step backward like he could physically distance himself from what was happening. One of the deputies said, Trent Colby. Trent looked at me one last time. Something in his face cracked. Not remorse. Not quite. More like the specific devastation of a man who gambled everything on a man staying dead. You loved me like a son, Trent said. Low, almost a whisper. But it didn't feel like it. He added, I did. I said. That part was real. They walked him out through the side gate. The backyard watched in total silence. Carol had her hand over her mouth. Brett was staring at his shoes. Julia was crying. Real tears. Finally. Though I couldn't tell you exactly what they were for, I picked up my glass from the table. Looked around at the neighbors. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I said. I mean that genuinely. You should eat. The food's excellent. I picked the place myself. A few stunned faces. As for me, I drained the glass. Set it down clean. I'm 56 years old. I've got 30 good years left. Minimum. I've got a company that's still standing. A foundation in my mother's name. And for the first time in a long time, I buttoned my jacket. Not a single person in my life who doesn't deserve to be there. I walked through the house. Out the front door. Into the warm Charleston night. My car was packed. Had been since Thursday. I pulled out of Cypress Hollow Lane for the last time. Turned onto Highway 17. And headed north. My phone buzzed once on the seat beside me. Carol. I didn't answer. 3 minutes later. I pulled over. Typed one text. And sent it. I heard every word. Then I put the phone in the glove box. Rolled the windows down. And drove. They wanted me dead. Instead, I gave them something worse. The truth. In front of everyone. I'll give you the rest quickly. Because you've earned the ending, same as I did. Trent was arraigned on identity theft and deed forgery charges the following month. Once the forensic accounting from Curtis's office was entered into evidence, the district attorney added wire fraud on top of it. He took a plea rather than risk a jury seeing the full transaction ledger, which meant restitution, a felony record, and 5 years of probation that effectively ended his career in logistics anywhere in the Southeast. Kaisi in Charleston hires a VP of operations who forged a dying man's signature to steal his own house. Carol took the duplex in Hanahan. She didn't fight the settlement in court, which told me her own attorney had looked at the fraud timeline and quietly advised her not to. Blake Sutter didn't stick around once the divorce made the local business page. Apparently, a personal trainer with his own client list doesn't want to be publicly associated with a fraud investigation, even one he had nothing to do with. Last I heard, Carol was working the front desk at a dental office off Coleman Boulevard. Brett lasted about 4 months on his own before he called me. Not to apologize, but to ask if I'd write him a reference for a warehouse job in Goose Creek. I told him I would. Honestly, if he actually worked there a year first. I haven't heard whether he did. Julia is the only one who's reached out more than once. Not begging. Not angling for anything. Just checking in. The way you check on someone you used to know well and are slowly getting to know again. I don't know yet what that relationship becomes. I'm in no hurry to find out. As for me, I sold my stake in Shaw Freight to my COO 18 months later at a fair price. Kept the name on the building because I built it and I'm allowed to be proud of that. And bought a smaller house on Sullivan's Island with a porch that faces the water instead of a tidal creek nobody can swim in. I still work 3 days a week. Mostly because I like it. Not because I need to. I take the bourbon slow now. I sleep fine. You wanted the inheritance. You got exactly what you earned.